Hey grade 7, welcome to another edition of Mr. V Teaches Math. Today we're going to move on to 5.13 in our textbooks, and it happens to look at the concept of decimals and fractions. In other words, what I need you to be able to do is to use various strategies to convert fractions to decimals, but also to be able to convert decimals to fractions. So let's get into some of the strategies that we'll be using for this topic. The first thing that we're going to be doing is we're going to use equivalent fractions to convert to a decimal. Okay, and so what happens in this method is that our goal is to try and get a denominator that's either 10 or 100 using a common factor here. Okay, now if my fraction is 2 over 5, I know that I can make this 5 into a 10 by multiplying it by 2. Now obviously what I need to do is whatever I multiply the bottom by, I have to multiply the top by. So this number, if I find an equivalent fraction, it ends up being 4 over 10. Once I'm at 4 over 10, I can just convert into 0.4. So I move a decimal place over once, or you can look at it as like 4 divided by 10, which just equals 0.4. Okay. With 3 quarters rather, there's not really a way for me to get from 4 to 10 using whole number multiplication. But what I can do is I can multiply 4 times 25 to get a number over 100. When I do that, and I have to multiply 3 times 25, I get 75. Anytime you see a number over 100 as a decimal, it just becomes that number with a decimal in front of it. So it becomes 0.75. Okay. Moving on, 1 over 2 is 1/2. I can get to 10 by multiplying 2 by 5. So again, this becomes 5 over 10. 5 divided by 10 is 0.5. Okay, you can just write down, this becomes 4 divided by 10, numerator divided by the denominator. Same thing here, and then here as well. 3 over 20, I need to get to 100 again, so this ends up becoming 15 over 100 using my multiplication. So 15 divided by 100 just equals 0.15. And then 4 over 25, this ends up being 16 over 100, which is 16 divided by 100, or 0.16. Okay, and so that's a way to use equivalent fractions, trying to get a denominator of 10 or 100 to convert easily and quickly to a decimal. That's the first strategy that we're going to use. The second strategy that we're going to use is just using straight up division to convert fractions to decimals. And what you see I've done here is I've decided not to try to get an equivalent fraction. I'm just going right to numerator divided by the denominator. So for this one, you typically need your calculator, unless you have some stuff memorized in your head, which is fine as well. So I'm going to put my calculator just over here. And what I've done, numerator divided by the denominator, which equals 0.75. And so with 2 over 5, numerator divided by the denominator, and when I do that division, I get 0.4, so that's my decimal. 5 divided by 8 is 0.625. 7 divided by 20, 0.35. 1 divided by 6, 0.1666666, and so on. And 4 divided by 11, 0.36, 36, 36, 36, 36, and on and on and on. So what you'll notice is that these first 4, these all have an ending point. But these ones keep going to infinity. So we need to actually talk about that just for a quick sec, because they have specific names. the two names that we're working with here, repeating decimals and terminating decimals. Just to bring this sheet back up for a second, terminating decimals are ones that have an endpoint. They have a couple of numbers, or even if they have a bunch of numbers, but they do have an endpoint. Repeating decimals keep going on and on, and there are basically two types of repeating decimals. So we're going to focus mainly on repeating and terminating up here, but there's one called non-repeating, non-terminating decimals, which means there are just numbers that just kind of go on and on and on, and there's no discernible pattern, and they just kind of keep going on. So to calculate these things, we do 3, or rather 8 into 3. And we'll add a couple of zeros. 8 goes into 33 times. 8 times 3 is 24. 6 left over. 8 goes into 60 7 times. It's 56. It's 4 left over. 8 goes into 40. 5 times. It's 40. No remainder. Okay, so this is done. The answer is 0.375. So this is called a terminating decimal because it has an endpoint. Now if I do 6 into 5 and add a few zeros here, 6 goes into 50 8 times. Kind of a 7-ish looking thing. It goes in 8 times though. So that's 8, 6 times 8 is 48. 2 down and 0. 6 goes into 20 3 times. That's 18. It's 2 left over. 6 goes into 20 3 times. It's 18. It's 2 left over. 6 goes into 20 3 times. And so you'll notice this pattern that kind of keeps repeating itself. So what we say is we have something like 0.83333, and then so on and so forth. We can rewrite that as 0.83. It's a little line over the number that repeats. So with our example over here, wait, this one? No, not this one. Oh, here it is. With our example, there we go. Sorry about that, guys. With our example here, 0.1666666 and on, what you would say is that's 0.16 with the repeat there. For this one that has a repeating pattern, we would say it's 0.36, but then put the line over the part that repeats. So we know that this, with that line, means that the 36 repeats over and over again. Okay? So that's that stuff. Now, to convert decimals to fractions, you need to know a little bit about place value, specifically place value after the decimal. So this, because there's one decimal place, this is in the tenths spot. So what we say this equals is 3/10. So you put if there's one digit there, you can put it over 10. There's 2 digits here, and the 5 is in the hundredths spot. So we put that like this, 15 hundredths. Okay. Here we have 0.243. Because this 3 is in the thousandths spot, we write 243 over 1,000. And then here we have a whole number with a decimal. So the whole number stays the same, stays right there. You put the decimal there. Nope, sorry, you don't put the decimal there. You put the whole number, and then it becomes 75 hundredths. 1 and 75 hundredths. Now you will notice that there are 2 here that we haven't yet simplified. So when we simplify 15 over 100, we actually get 3 over 20 in simplest form, and 1 and 75 over 100 simplifies down to 1 and 3/4. So remember, you always put that stuff in simplest form. Okay, so that's how you convert decimals to fractions. Lastly, let's go over a couple of examples of converting fractions to decimals. So I have 3 over 5. I know I can get from 5 to 10. So I'm going to multiply each of these numbers by 2, which gives me 6 over 10. 6 over 10 is just equal to 0.6. Now I have 1 and 7/8. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 7 and divide it by 8. on my calculator, and when I do that, I get 0.875. That's not actually the answer, because I still have this 1. So my answer, if I include the 1, is 1.875. And then I have 5 over 11, which is the same thing as 5 divided by 11, which gives me 0.45 repeat, because this is what comes up on my calculator after I do that division. So that 4/5 is the part that repeats. Okay, so there's some strategies on converting decimals to fractions and fractions to decimals.